Buckle up, because what you're about to see is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about our place in the universe. Prepare to witness footage the government tried to bury, showing objects defying our understanding of physics and technology. These aren't blurry lights or weather balloons. They are undeniable proof of unidentified aerial phenomena that raise profound questions about our reality.
The organic object. Leland Melvin is an American engineer and retired NASA astronaut who served on board the Space Shuttle Atlantis as a mission specialist. He is an incredibly brilliant man with an incredible resume and possibly has one of the best NASA photos of all time, but it's his expertise and intelligence that really makes this story so unnerving. He claimed that while on a space mission as he was orbiting Earth, which is definitely the coolest beginning for a spooky tale, but also really sets the stage for a multitude of horrifying things that could be about to happen. While he was on this mission, he said he saw a quote alien-like organic object. NASA disputed his claims and said that what he saw was just ice, but I feel like I trust the person who actually saw it with their own eyes. Leland went on to write that whatever he saw was quote translucent, curved, organic looking. I have no explanations to offer, but I will say it certainly is interesting and kind of terrifying, and it only adds more horror to the story when you realize that they tried to cover it up. In our number 9 spot today we have Levelland. This incident took place in 1957 in Levelland, Texas, and actually was the inspiration for a scene in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In the real-life incident, dozens of citizens from across the city began individually reporting seeing a rocket or strange set of lights or some sort of unidentified object, but that wasn't it. Whatever these citizens were seeing was also reportedly interfering with their vehicles as well. Engines were suddenly just dying out and lights were cutting out. If this happened just 1 or 2 times, this could have been some kind of a really strange coincidence, but it was way too many instances. Something else had to have been at play. The authorities at first thought that the reports were a hoax until they too saw the strange lights as they began to investigate. This is where Project Blue Book came in to also investigate, and they came up with quite the conclusion. They claimed that whatever had happened here was simply just a case of an electrical storm and ball lightning that caused the lights in the mechanical malfunctions. That's super reasonable, but the catch with this explanation is that there were no reported thunderstorms in the area that night at all. I'm just saying, something here clearly isn't adding up quite right. In our number 8 spot today we have the lone survivor. This is an unexplained signal that was first detected in 2003 when astronomers were using a massive telescope in order to re-examine 200 different areas of the sky. I say re-examine because these were areas where there was once a signal that was detected coming from them, and they were taking a look back to see if they could detect the same signal again. During this re-examination, they found all of the signals had disappeared except for one. This signal didn't only stick around, but it actually got stronger. This signal is coming from between the constellations of Pisces and Aries, and the curious thing about this location is that it resides in a place where there are known obvious planets or stars. To make things a little more mysterious, there are scientists who believe that the frequency this signal is in is the frequency alien life would be most likely to use if they were trying to contact us. I have no idea what leads them to that theory, but it felt too interesting to exclude. While there are other possibilities of what these signals are or where they're coming from, it's quite an interesting piece of information and is something that definitely deserves more looking into. In our number 7 spot today we have the space snake. Dr. Franklin Story Musgrave is an American physician and retired NASA astronaut, and considering how credible he tends to be, despite the absurdities of this story, it makes it hard to pass off as a lie so easily. While he was in space, he claims that he saw something that I don't wish upon anyone, a sort of space snake. He said that he saw an 8-foot-long white snake floating through space. I don't even know what I would do. Probably cry? Probably call Houston? I'm not sure. There are many people who think that this was simply just a detached hose from the spaceship, but Dr. Musgrave remains adamant on what he saw, and to be completely honest, I believe him. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. I mean, I don't know what happens in space, but I do find it really hard to believe that this person, who would likely be really familiar with the parts of a spacecraft, mistook a hose for a snake. Also, how would they not notice an 8-foot-long hose missing? Again, I'm certainly no astronaut or scientist or engineer, but it all just seems very strange. In our number 6 spot today, we have the classified report. We are just barely getting into 2023, but already there are some crazy announcements, including one regarding a report that was delivered to Congress from the Director of National Intelligence. Basically, since August of last year, there's been a total of 510 unidentified aerial phenomenon observed in protected airspace or near sensitive facilities. According to the report, 26 of these were described as drones, 163 were labeled as balloons or balloon-like entities, and 6 were described as clutter, whatever that means. This is all fine and well, but the concern sets in when we consider that this leaves 171 sightings unaccounted for, some of which appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. It's also important to note that the majority of these sightings are coming directly from Navy and Air Force pilots. Here's the thing, what we know as the public is only a 12-page declassified summary of the actual, real, secret report that was delivered to Congress. Only time will tell if we ever find out what the rest of the report includes or what will happen with further investigation into the 171 sightings, but hopefully if answers do arise, one day we'll find out. And hey, maybe if they don't, maybe Anonymous will just hack them, and then we'll find out. In our number 5 spot today, we have the lights. Leroy Chiao was the commander of the ISS in 2005, and this is exactly when this strange sighting occurred. It is said that he wasn't the only one who witnessed this, however, as it is said that the entire crew was there to see this really unexplainable occurrence along with him. Basically, it is said that they saw a strange set of lights while up in space. He went out to describe the lights and said that they were in the formation of an upside down V, and that they ended up just stumbling upon this bizarre situation as the formation flew past them. I'm just gonna say it. I mean, I think it's aliens. I just don't have any other possible explanations, and you're telling me that the whole crew saw it? Not just one person this time, all of them. I swear, nothing will convince me of aliens more than an astronaut's first-hand account. Cause like, it's hard for aliens to come and visit us here on Earth, but like, they're just flying through space? They're like, yeah man, this is what we do too, just on the highway. Okay, sorry, I'm going a little crazy. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Lubbock incident. On August 25th, 1951 in Lubbock, Texas, a group of scientists from Texas Technical College were all hanging out in the backyard of geology professor Dr. W.I. Robinson. They were all chilling, enjoying each other's company, until around 9:20 p.m. when they saw something strange. It was a V-shaped formation of 15 to 30 bluish-green lights passing overhead. They were completely confused over what it could be, but figured that the lights would likely reappear, which they did. About an hour later, the lights reappeared, and at this point, all of these scientists knew that they had witnessed something exceptionally interesting. But what was it? The scientists weren't the only one to witness the lights either. About 350 miles away in Albuquerque, New Mexico, an employee of the Atomic Energy Commission's top secret Sandia Corporation, who had a high-level Q security clearance, had been sitting outside with his wife, quote, gazing at the night sky, commenting on how beautiful it was, when both of them were startled at the sight of a huge airplane flying swiftly and silently over their home. On the aft edge of the wings, there were 6 to 8 pairs of soft, glowing bluish lights. There were more sightings as well, all reporting a similar thing. The group of scientists began investigating, tracking the lights, which they had witnessed 12 more times. They measured the angle of the flights, they tracked the speed, and they attempted, unsuccessfully, to try and measure the UFO's altitude. Here's the deal with this though, the government did end up investigating, but the official explanation for these lights is the most cryptic message I've ever seen. It read, quote, I thought that the professor's lights might have been some kind of birds reflecting the light from mercury vapor streetlights, but I was wrong. They weren't birds. They weren't refracted light, but they weren't spaceships. The lights that the professors saw have been positively identified as a very commonplace and easily explainable natural phenomena. I can't divulge exactly the way the answer was found because it is an interesting story of how a scientist set up complete instrumentation to track down the lights. Telling the story would lead to his identity, and in exchange for his story, I promised the man complete anonymity. Despite people claiming that this mystery has been solved, by this explanation, people are left with a lot more questions than answers. You know? It's just some natural phenomena. We're not going to tell you which one though. In our number 3 spot today we have glowing green. Gordon Cooper is a well-known astronaut after having flown the Mercury 9 and the Gemini 5, and in fact he was the last American to spend time in space alone. But despite all of these exciting accolades, I want to take you back to May 15th, 1963. Here he was sent off into space in a Mercury capsule for a 22-orbit journey around the Earth, and while on this journey he saw something extremely unsettling, a glowing green object that would approach his capsule. During his final orbit he did tell the tracking station of this object that was quickly approaching his capsule, and they were able to pick up this UFO on their radar, but once Cooper landed, reporters were told that he was not allowed to answer questions regarding this UFO. It's even more interesting considering how Gordon has been a very vocal and firm believer in UFOs, so I have to ask, what do you think this was? In our number 2 spot today we have the Shag Harbor incident. This UFO encounter is often referred to as Canada's Roswell, so I was shocked that I hadn't heard of it before. Basically, this incident took place on October 4th, 1967, when an unknown object crashed into the water near Shag Harbor, which is a tiny town in Nova Scotia. There were at least 11 people who witnessed this object as it crashed, and many people claim to have heard a whistling sound followed by a loud bang when the crash took place. The witnesses that claimed to have seen the UFO were all doing a bunch of different things at the time. One couple was just sitting on their porch, but 2 witnesses that really get me are a flight pilot and a ship captain. On Air Canada Flight 305, First Officer Robert Ralph pointed out to Captain Pierre Charbonneau that there was something strange out the left side of the aircraft. They reported an object tracking along at a parallel course a few miles away and described it as a brilliantly lit rectangular object with a string of smaller lights trailing the object. Shortly after they first noticed it, there was a large but silent explosion near the unknown object, and then 2 minutes later there was a second explosion, but this one faded to a blue cloud. As for the ship captain, Captain Leo Howard Mercy saw 4 blips on the decorator that were totally stationary. This led to him looking up to the sky, and this is when he saw 4 bright objects sitting in a rectangular formation about 28 kilometers from the vessel's window. He wasn't even the only one who saw it on board. The entire crew of nearly 20 fishermen stood on deck and watched. A man named Laurie Wickens was another one of the witnesses, and he and some friends ended up calling the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because they saw a huge object floating in the Atlantic Ocean about 1,000 feet offshore. This is all super weird, and not only the RCMP, but also the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Canadian Air Force became involved in the investigation, but nothing was ever recovered or found. But it was also revealed that all commercial, private, and military aircrafts along the eastern seaboard were accounted for. So what could all of these witnesses have seen? Since they never officially identified what it was, in the official Government of Canada documents it is listed as a UFO. In our number 1 spot today we have the 2021 UFO. On February 21st of 2021, a blogger was using a radio scanner to try and pick up the feed from an aircraft when he received much more than he ever expected. He intercepted the transmission of the wrong aircraft, but at the right time. As an American Airlines flight was headed from Cincinnati to Phoenix around 1:19 p.m., the pilot came on the radio to ask the question, "Do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over top of us." After this, he followed up with, quote, "I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast right over top of us." Not only were FAA air traffic controllers not able to see any object in the area on their radar scope, but they still have been unable to identify exactly what it could have been. This does happen more often than any of us really know, and it is possible that the object could have been a part of some covert military or navy operation, but it certainly raises some alarm bells that it was unable to be tracked in any sort of capacity. I wonder if this is one of these stories that will remain a mystery, or if one day we'll get some sort of answers as to what exactly happened here.
Starting us off today, we have a mission documented to the public by none other than Bob Lazar. You might have heard of him before. The mission took place in the 1980s and involved the reverse engineering of an extraterrestrial spacecraft fueled by an element that was supposedly undiscovered at the time and wouldn't be openly discovered until 2003, when a team of Russian and American scientists were able to synthesize it. The element was element 115, also known as moscovium. It's super heavy and highly radioactive and apparently out of this world, much like the spaceship Lazar claims to have worked on while working as an engineer on the base. He said that the spaceship had been collecting collected by the agency along with 8 others. It was taken apart piece by piece and then replicated by the Area 51 team. The engineering mission was a success, and the homemade alien spacecraft took its first flight right in front of Bob Lazar's eyes. He claimed that it was nothing like anything he had ever seen before. It did not need any form of acceleration prior to takeoff, but rather the vessel lifted directly into the air and had the ability to fly at unseen speeds. Next up, we have the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Mission. That's a mouthful. A secret mission that operated out of the base with the purpose of identifying airborne threats to American land and its people, whether the threats be out of this world or not. I guess it makes sense that this was a classified mission. I mean, who really wants either a threat or target to know that they've got eyes on them? Since the operation began, it's become declassified, but it remains highly unpublicized, most likely due to censoring, along with the fact that there's really not much we know about it other than the fact that that's the name of it, and that's pretty much it. Sources have come forward, however, insisting that the program, which operated for 5 years between 2007 and 2012, with a budget of $22 million, was created for something much larger than international threats, claiming that the majority of the budget was dedicated to identifying and capturing intergalactic ones instead. Which of course brings us to the Roswell cover-up and others like it, aka the ongoing mission of the base to keep Americans and the rest of the world in the dark about what's really going on in our skies, our atmosphere, and our galaxy. The Roswell incident follows an aircraft that crash-landed in the field of a farmer in New Mexico. When Area 51 got news of the incident, they rushed to collect all the pieces and cover up all traces of the wreck. They claimed it was a weather balloon but never released any proof, and on top of that, what they collected from the farmer's property was sent to multiple other bases for a more in-depth analysis. If it was actually a weather balloon, I really don't see why that would be necessary. Of course, this isn't the only possible UFO cover-up known to date. Multiple sightings of UFOs have been reported and subsequently debunked, quote unquote, by officials at Area 51, but they rarely provide any information beyond a statement saying, "It's not what you think it is." Well, I don't think I believe them. Next up, we have hazardous waste disposal and the possible underground testing that took place in, on, around, or under Groom Lake, also known as Papoose Lake. That's a fun one to say, papoose. On January 30th of 1996, US President Bill Clinton signed a presidential declaration exempting the Air Force operations near the lake from having to comply with federal, state, interstate, or local hazardous or solid waste laws based on the grounds that it might require the disclosure of classified information. Wild! As you can imagine, this was terrible for locals in the area. I mean, the lake became illegal hazardous waste dumping ground. A lawsuit was filed alleging that the base had gone against the Conservation and Recovery Act in the area, but have no fear. In September of 2003, US President George W. Bush reiterated the fact that the military base was well within their rights to continue their lawless and potentially harmful waste disposal free of charge and without interference from the law. In the spring of 1997, 1 year after the allowance was originally granted, a man named Jerry Freeman somehow snuck his way onto the base and became the first civilian to see the lake after the hazardous disposals had begun. He described it as dried up and vibrating from the center with like a pulsing light, which led him to theorize that secret government experiments might possibly be taking place underneath or around the lake as well. Next up, we've got Mission Totally Spies. Not really, but it was totally a mission that involved a spy plane, more specifically the Lockheed U-2 spy plane, a United States aircraft that in August of 1955 had the ability to fly up to 70,000 feet high at 500 miles per hour. That's super advanced for the time. The reason that the plane was engineered, built, and tested on the base was because Area 51 is massive, which allowed the process of inventing, testing, and deploying the plane to take place virtually undetected. Well, kinda. I mean, the Soviets didn't see it, so that was a win for sure. Some locals did, and when they first saw the plane, they actually believed it to be some kind of alien spacecraft, which may lend a reason as to why the base became so intermingled with extraterrestrial folklore. For a while, the government let this line of thinking slide, but eventually it revealed that what had been seen in the skies around Area 51 was in fact an advanced piece of espionage technology, or so they say. Okay, another great use for a massive secret base. Probably nuclear testing, right? Yeah, I think so. Do you think so? Because the fellows over at Area 51 definitely thought so. The base became a nuclear testing facility during the 1950s after the US, along with Canada and the United Kingdom, created the first nuclear weapon, aka the Manhattan Project. The base was used to test the severity and the risk level of the weapon, as well as its impact on environmental factors, along with environmental restoration techniques. A hazardous materials spill center was also built on the base, but I think we all know exactly how the majority of the hazardous waste was handled. Papoose. A crap ton of fission-type nuclear devices were detonated in the area, as well as dirty bombs, which are radioactive dispersal devices that combine radioactive material with conventional explosives. This led to a permanent change in the area's landscape, and to this day, the soils of the Nevada test site remain contaminated with radioactive materials. We are all aware that censorship is rampant in this day and age, but it's really nothing new, as highlighted by the publishing and quick removal of a photograph showcasing the base. The image was taken in 1998 by a Russian spy satellite. I'm not sure if they knew at the time that they had just struck American gold, but it seems as though in 2000 they came to realize exactly what they had achieved. The first ever photograph taken of Area 51, and from an aerial point of view no less, was released to the public. It was posted on a website called terraserver.com, which charged viewers around $7 to see the image. And it was actually totally legal, because in 1992 the Open Skies Treaty dictated that all 24 signatory nations, meaning all 24 nations who signed the treaty, had permission to photograph and publish each other's territories. What's strange though, is that shortly after the release of the photograph, the website was hacked and the photo disappeared. A website that was working just fine without any issues for years prior. After the image was released, the Pentagon did, however, finally acknowledge the fact that they did in fact have a large military base operating in Nevada, but provided no information regarding said operations. While the photo was removed back then, it's now back on the internet and available today. Speaking of the Pentagon, it seems as though in 2020 the public finally got their wish when the Pentagon finally declassified a number of videos and photographs that we were, all well aware that they had. I'm talking UFOs, baby. The Pentagon released the photos and videos on their official website, showcasing a variety of unidentified flying objects and aerial phenomena. Along with this, the FBI also declassified 16 documents outlining their thoughts and findings on the matter, although a lot of the information in the documents has been redacted. So the truth is out there. The government has admitted to having a secret base and to having been actively tracking UFO and UAP activities. But here is the thing. Are they feeding us this information because they really truly have decided to be transparent in their quest to uncover the secrets of the universe, or are they feeding us to keep our mouths shut? So apparently before all the nukes and aliens and hazardous waste and spy planes and secrets, Area 51 was nothing more than a humble testing and training facility for the pilots of the U-2 aircraft. Apparently. Its official government name was, and actually still is, the Nevada Test and Training Range, a unit of Neal's Air Force Base. Doesn't really have the same ring to it though, if you ask me. Other nicknames for the base have been Paradise Ranch, The Ranch, Waterdown, and Dreamland, probably because they're dreaming if they think we don't know that they're holding on to aliens. Anyways, in November of 1959, about 4.5 years after the base was established, a radar testing facility became active. And as always with Area 51, while there is not much information out there as to what the radars are being used for, it has been speculated that their main purpose was to track the detectability of the U-2 aircrafts. Seems pretty obvious, but I feel like it's kind of weird that they didn't just come out and say that after the purpose of the U-2 spycraft was revealed. But I think I've given up on trying to figure out why they release the things they do and don't the things they don't. Anyways, finally on our list today we have the discovery of aliens and the subsequent experimentation on said aliens and their extraterrestrial modes of transportation. Now, in the beginning we already touched on the fact that the military personnel at Area 51 were allegedly able to reconstruct an alien spacecraft using reverse engineering. But just like how when there's smoke there's fire, when there's an alien spacecraft, there must be an alien. Many members of the public believe that not only have the government found and taken into custody the ships of aliens, but the actual aliens themselves. Whether or not they are thin green men with oval heads and bulging eyes is still up for debate. Maybe we should get a petition going in the comments and see if the government will finally comply with the Freedom of Information Act. Or maybe they already have and they don't actually have to tell us everything. Who knows? I'm a YouTuber, not a lawyer. Starting off our list today, we have Cuba's underwater city, the remains of a 12-acre city sitting at a depth of roughly 8,380 meters. In 2001, sonar scans off the coast of Cuba revealed that the seafloor was littered with geometric structures that could very well be the remains of a lost ancient city. And some experts even claim that using the same technology they were able to identify the presence of a pyramid as well as a large sculpture of a sphinx sitting on the ocean floor. While it might be a bit far out there are some people who are claiming that Cuba's underwater city might actually be the lost city of Atlantis, which in its heyday was said to have held great knowledge and power as well as a great power source. Perhaps that source sank within the city, causing the electromagnetic activity in the area to go haywire, which might explain the 40 ships and 20 airplane disappearances in the area. I mean, it could be nothing. After the initial reports documenting the find were released, there were no follow-up reports or expeditions, but on the other hand, there probably were follow-up expeditions and it's just a cover-up. Next up, we've got the shark snacker. In 2014, it was discovered that something was attacking and eating great white sharks off the coast of southwest Australia. Scientists were alerted of the strange phenomenon after the research tag of a great white suddenly and quickly dove down to 1,903 feet into the depths of the ocean. Not only that, but the temperature of the tag actually increased as it made its descent from 46 to 78 degrees Fahrenheit. The only likely explanation for the fast descent paired with an increase in temperature was that the great white, the apex predator of the ocean, had been eaten by something bigger, faster, and stronger than it. Two theories emerged as to what kind of animal could have done this. One, it was an orca, also known as a killer whale, which are known to be incredibly aggressive and also twice as long and 3 times heavier than great whites. Or two, that it was a much larger undiscovered shark with an appetite not far off from Dahmer's. Next up, the Devil's Sea, aka the Asian Bermuda Triangle, located in Japan's corner of the Pacific Ocean. In 2014 and 2015, 2 separate passenger planes carrying a total of over 250 people crashed over the waters of the Devil's Sea for no known reason. This prompted people to look into the history of the area, and when they did, they discovered that the disappearance of the 2 aircrafts were not an isolated incident. In fact, in the 1950s, many large vessels disappeared under mysterious circumstances in the waters as well, with 9 of those disappearances occurring in the span of just 4 years. Because of this, the Japanese government decided to send out a military ship to investigate. Whatever it found, we will never know, because it also disappeared. For whatever reason, the Devil's Sea just sucks up ships and planes down into its watery depths. Perhaps the area is a gateway to hell, as the name implies, or possibly it's electromagnetically charged, or maybe full of sea serpents, or maybe all 3. Whatever the reason, you will not catch me there. Next up, we have the submarine disappearances of 1968. Between the months of January and May, 4 submarines from different countries went missing, lost to the deep sea. The first to go down was the Israeli INS Dakar, which disappeared in January in the Mediterranean Sea along with its crew of 69 men. 2 days later, a French submarine, the Minerva, and its crew of 52 men disappeared in the same region. Later, a Soviet nuclear sub with a crew of 98 disappeared in the South Pacific, and after that, another Soviet nuclear sub sank down to the bottom of the North Atlantic Sea. In 1999, the first wreck, the INS Dakar, was found, but it is debated whether or not the sub sank after descending past its abilities or being taken out by opposing forces. The rest of the wrecks remain a complete mystery, but in 1974, the CIA did recover pieces of one of the Soviet nuclear subs, but when asked about their findings, their answers consisted solely of, "We can neither confirm nor deny." So, cover up, I guarantee it. Speaking of mysterious disappearances, we've covered subs, ships, planes, but how about the disappearance of an entire island? Prior to the 18th century, the small island of Bermeja, or Bermeja, I'm sorry guys who don't know how to pronounce that. Anyways, it was widely featured on maps of the Yucatan Peninsula, which separates the Gulf of Mexico from the Caribbean Sea. However, the depiction of the island slowly started disappearing in the 1700s, with the last confirmed appearance of the island being depicted on a map created in 1921. While you might believe the existence of the island to have been a myth created by ancient cartographers, Mexico actually confirmed the existence of the island and even made 3 attempts to locate its remains in 2009. The missions were unsuccessful, but hope is still out there that one day it will be found. There are 2 main theories surrounding why the island might have disappeared in the first place. 1. Rising sea levels caused the low-lying island to sink, and 2. The CIA blew it up because the areas surrounding it were rich in oil and Americans wanted to improve their claim over the area. 2 very different theories, but I want to know which one sounds the most likely to you. We know which one sounds the most likely to me, but let me know your thoughts down below. Next up, we've got aquatic megafauna, gigantic animals that exist within the unexplored depths of the ocean. Although many marine species remain undiscovered, there are a few species of massive aquatic life that we do know of, other than whales and sharks, of course. Both the giant squid and the colossal squid come to mind. The largest giant squid ever recorded measured in to be 43 feet long and weighed in to be almost 1,000 pounds, but it's said that they can measure up to 66 feet and weigh well over 1,000 pounds. The largest recorded colossal squid ever found measured in at just under 43 feet, but weighed over 1,000 pounds at 1,091. But like the giant squid, it is believed that they can grow to be much larger. Both animals have 3 hearts, 8 arms, and 2 tentacles. The giant squid's 8 arms are covered in sharp, serrated suction cups, and the colossal squid suckers are equipped with strong, sharp hooks. Needless to say, you wouldn't want to run into either one. Considering these guys were found with only 5% of the ocean having been explored, I can only imagine what other kinds of gigantic, mysterious creatures we'll find if we keep looking. And I suggest we keep looking. Speaking of giant things in the ocean, let's talk about the Stronsay Beast. In 1808, a massive aquatic animal carcass washed up on the shores of Stronsay in Scotland, measuring up to 55 feet in length, even with part of its tail missing. Originally, scientists assumed that the carcass had been that of a large shark, but upon closer inspection it became clear that whatever creature they were looking at had paw-like appendages instead of fins, and so it was decided that the animal was a new species. Since its original discovery back in the 1800s, the animal has not been seen, but maybe one day, if we look hard enough, we'll once again find the creature that likely gave way to tales of Loch Ness monsters. From monsters to aliens. It's a NASA video. We had to include at least one point paying homage to our friends from afar. I mean, I hope they're friendly. There is one distinct structure that comes to mind when you combine the topics of aliens and the deep sea, 2 of my favorite, and that is the Baltic Sea anomaly. The anomaly was originally discovered in 2011 by sonar imaging by the Sweden Ocean X diving team while they were hunting for treasure on the floor of the northern Baltic Sea. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell you that the thing looks like a UFO. The formation seen on the bottom of the seafloor is structured and purposeful, with patterns along the stair-like structures along the sides and top of the, what I'm assuming to be a spacecraft. As far as the public knows, it has only ever been explored using radar, but I have a feeling at least a few people have been down there and are either holding the truth about what they found incredibly close to their chest, or they were killed as soon as they made it back up to the surface. Either one, it's possible. Next up, we have the Jacuzzi of Despair, a deadly lake located at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. The Jacuzzi has a circumference of about 100 feet and it reaches a depth of about 12. So, how is it that there is a small body of water separated from the ocean located over 3,000 feet below the surface? Well, I'll tell you. The jacuzzi is actually something called a brine pool, a pocket of water 5 times saltier than the surrounding seawater, so dense that it refuses to mix with its surroundings. Not only that, but brine pools also create the perfect condition for methane gas and hydrogen sulfide to thrive. So although this underwater pool might look cool, anything that is unfortunate enough to enter into its divided waters will most certainly die, and that includes you and me, so let's avoid it. And finally, to finish off our list today, we have Leptocephalus giganticus, but we're just gonna call it Lep because whoever named that thing kinda sucks. I'm looking at you, Peter Henry John Castle. The Lep is an extremely rare species of eel that was discovered in 1959, which was super lucky because the species is known to regularly inhabit the deep depths and it's rarely ever seen. 2 specimens of the species have been studied, but only in their larva baby phase. And given that eel larvae are generally only 1/32 of their adult life, the fact that one of these specimens measured in at 6 feet long is crazy. And it means it's possible that adults of the species inhabiting the deep can grow to be up to 192 feet long, which would make it the longest aquatic animal, or longest animal altogether for that matter, known to man, far surpassing the lion's mane jellyfish, which is the previous record holder should this turn out to be true. It measures in at 120 feet in length. Blue whale, just for reference, measures in at only 98 feet. Pretty wild stuff.
We're gonna start off the list with a pretty insane news story that didn't really make the rounds over here, which is surprising because this is absolutely nuts. So last year, residents of a small isolated village in Peru claimed to have been attacked in the night by 7-foot-tall alien beings with glowing yellow eyes. They also had dark hoods and wore armor. They looked a bit like Green Goblin from Spider-Man. At one point, one of the beings even tried to kidnap a young woman of the village. And these attacks happened repeatedly, to the point where many villagers said they were living in fear. A number of residents claimed to have fired at the creatures, but they didn't go down. They could also fly. This was all over South American news. The Peruvian military was even called in to do night patrols. So what the hell was going on here? Well, the media has now come out saying that the attacks weren't aliens, but they were just illegal miners dressed as aliens trying to scare the villagers off. But how does that explain them being seemingly immune to bullets or flying? Carlos Castro Quintanilla, the prosecutor investigating the case, believes that the miners must have been using state-of-the-art technology that allowed them to fly. What does he think these illegal miners, what do they somehow have access to jetpacks? I don't know. I'm not buying that. I'm on the fence about this one. It could be illegal miners. Maybe they had bulletproof vests, but the jetpack thing, I've seen real life jetpacks and they are clunky messes. They're just, first of all, no one has access to those things. And even like flying them around, it's just, it's not a smooth kind of thing. We don't have jetpacks, all right? Plus, I think these villagers are smart enough to know the difference between people in masks and awful jetpacks and alien beings. I don't know. A whole bunch of these villagers all said they saw this, so it's interesting.
Next up, we have the Battle of Los Angeles, or the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, which took place on February 23rd of 1942, just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. That night, all of Los Angeles went under blackout as directed by the US military, meaning all lights were off. And while the lights on the ground had been turned off, the sky above was lit up by a myriad of strange, unidentified flying objects. The military opened fire, and onlookers were absolutely stunned as 1,400 rounds of ammunition fired up into the sky appeared to have no effect on the UFO or UFOs. Smoke filled the sky, and when it cleared, not a single craft was to be found, in the sky or on the ground. Shrapnel that appeared to have ricocheted off of the target resulted in the death of 5 civilians. 3 more were killed in car accidents due to the chaos of the event, and 2 more of heart attacks due to the stress of the 2-hour-long attack. To this day, it is unknown what objects filled the sky of Los Angeles that night. The event went down in history as one of the largest UFO sightings to date. We really don't know what happened, but if you have any theories, Feel free to let us know in the comments.
Next on the list, we have the Shag Harbor incident. At 11:20 p.m. on October 4th, 1967, multiple witnesses in Nova Scotia watched as a mysterious object crashed into the waters of Shag Harbor. But let's backtrack a little and go over some of the other sightings from that night leading up to this. It all began with Air Canada Flight 305, where First Officer Robert Ralph alerted Captain Pierre Charbonneau to a strange object outside the aircraft over Sherbrooke in Saint John, Quebec. It was described as a brightly lit rectangular object with smaller lights trailing it. Meanwhile, Daryl Dory and his family in Mahone Bay saw a large object in the sky. Captain Leo Howard Mercy, a fisherman, witnessed stationary blips on his radar. He, along with his crew, then looked up to see 4 bright objects in a rectangular formation in the sky. News stations were also being flooded with numerous other people reporting glowing objects over Halifax. And then we have the crash. A ton of residents reported hearing a whoosh, followed by a loud bang, and at least 11 people reported seeing a low-flying object crash into the water of Shag Harbor. I'm sure you hear a lot of banging sounds around Shag Harbor. Terrible joke. Witnesses watched as an object with glowing lights floated in the water. It was just kind of like floating there. The RCMP was then called in, who then contacted the Rescue Coordination Center, but before they could arrive, the object started to sink into the water. The Coast Guard was called in, as well as the military. No debris or survivors were found, and according to the Rescue Coordination Center in Halifax, all commercial, private, and military aircraft, they were all accounted for along the eastern seaboard. Whatever this object was, it's never been identified, and it has been officially designated as an unidentified flying object.
Next on our list today, we have the North Yorkshire, England event, which took place in 1952. Reports of a bright silver disc-shaped object the size of a large bus hovering in the sky began spreading across the country. The aircraft was witnessed by people from many different towns, as well as Royal Air Force pilots. In the days that followed, more similar objects were spotted in the skies above the county. People described the aircrafts as being even larger than the one in the first sighting, and described their maneuvers as being impossible for any known aircraft at the time. The events went on for many days and had hundreds of witnesses. Some even used radar technology to track the unknown craft, but no one was able to figure out its origin. Speculation of the UFO being an alien spaceship quickly took off, with others believing that the spherical ships belonged to the government and that they had been deployed into the sky for some kind of super secret military operation. Well, here's the thing. The event took place over 70 years ago, and the government has yet to fess up to the ships being theirs, which at this point you'd think they would have done, right? I mean, to be fair, if they did fess up by now, I probably still wouldn't believe them, but I want to know what you guys think. Alien spacecraft or yet another government cover-up story?
Next up is the Cash-Landrum incident. On the evening of December 29th, 1980, Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Vicki's grandson Colby Landrum were driving home to Dayton, Texas after dining out when they encountered a mysterious diamond-shaped object emitting flames and intense heat. It was floating above the trees. At first, Landrum, thinking it was a sign of the second coming, told Cash to stop the car. Cash considered turning back, but the road was too narrow. The object was described as intensely bright, with small blue lights descending toward the road, emitting flames periodically. Cash and Landrum had gotten out of the car to look at the object, but got back in when the heat became more and more intense. It got so bad that it burned Cash's hand when she touched the car. Landrum even left a handprint on the dashboard. Then the object started ascending again, and after it was back up in the air, a group of military helicopters surrounded it. So after making it back home that night, the three started feeling off, reporting symptoms like nausea and skin burns after the encounter, with Cash experiencing severe health issues, including large blisters and clumps of her hair falling out. Vicki developed a cataract, and Betty was diagnosed with cancer later on. Symptoms resembling radiation exposure, really looks like. The two went on to seek legal action, suing the US government for $20 million, but the case ended up being dismissed.
Alright, next on our list we have the Gorman incident. In October of 1948, Second Lieutenant George F. Gorman was flying a P-15 Mustang aircraft during a training flight. Everything seemed to be going pretty routine until he noticed a strange object in the sky. At first he assumed it to be some type of weather balloon or other kind of experimental aircraft, but as he flew closer to the object to get a better observation, he realized it was something entirely different. He described it as some kind of pulsating, glowing ball of light. He tried to fly away from it, but to his surprise, the object began to follow him. Gorman tried to outmaneuver the unidentifiable flying object, but he was unsuccessful. He claimed that it appeared as though the UFO could anticipate his moves before they even happened. After a while, Gorman began to get seriously freaked out, and in a final attempt to lose this strange glowing ball, he decided the best plan of action was a nosedive. He dove the plane directly towards the ground, and after a 27-minute chase, he was able to lose the object. He leveled out his plane and lived to tell the tale. But no one, including Gorman, knows exactly what was seen in the sky that day. But what's even crazier is that after the incident, his plane tested positive for radioactivity. No one knows why. That's so wild.
Next on the list is the Alder UFO sighting. On April 23, 2007, pilot Ray Boyer and his passengers observed a strange light while flying near Alderney. At first he thought it was reflected light, but soon realized that it was an object, estimating its size to be about a mile wide. He described it as bright yellow gold with black bands on the side. He also spotted a second object, similar but further away. Boyer reported the sighting to authorities, labeling it a near miss. Now, despite his report, the British Ministry of Defense didn't carry out an investigation, stating it occurred in French airspace. Witnesses on Boyer's aircraft and another pilot from Blue Islands confirmed seeing similar objects. One described it as sunlight colored and another as an elongated oval.
Next up, we have a UFO sighting at the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. The incident took place at 4:15 p.m. on November 7th of 2006, so it's actually pretty recent. 12 different airport employees reported seeing a large saucer-shaped, unidentified flying object hovering over one of the airport gates, gate C-17 to be exact. And it was actually hovering above another aircraft that had been set to depart O'Hare but was delayed because there was a giant flying saucer hovering above it. Duh. The pilots in the plane, along with mechanics on the ground and airline management, reported to have seen the object. But air traffic controllers, however, did not see it because for some reason the craft above the plane was not picked up on their radars. The UFO was visible for several minutes before it suddenly disappeared. And even though the incident had many credible witnesses and was later investigated by the Federal Aviation Administration, no explanation was ever given regarding the events of the day.
Alright, the Travis Walton case. So this story has it all. A UFO sighting corroborated by multiple witnesses and a supposed encounter with alien beings. So it was November 5th, 1975. Travis Walton and his fellow loggers had finished up their day in the Apache Site-Greaves National Forest in Arizona. They loaded onto their truck and began the drive back home. They hadn't gotten far though when they noticed odd lights hovering above some trees. They decided to drive closer to see what was going on, and that's when they saw a massive unidentified object. Travis got out of the truck to see what the thing was, and then was suddenly lifted into the air by a beam of light. The rest of his friends drove out of there in a panic, but knew they couldn't leave him there. By the time they returned to the scene though, Travis was gone, and he would be missing for days. 5 days after disappearing, Travis Walton showed up again though. He placed a call to his sister's place from a phone booth outside of town. He was found disoriented and disturbed and began telling this horrifying story about how he'd woken up in a hospital-like room where two bald, alien-like entities were looking down at him. He tried to fight the creatures off before a human being wearing a helmet led him to another room where 3 other humans put a plastic mask over his face. He then lost consciousness again before waking up by the side of the highway.
And to finish off our list today, we have the possible involvement of a UFO in the disappearance of an F-89C Scorpion jet fighter. The aircraft had been used in a training mission over Lake Superior in Michigan in 1953. It had left from the Kincheol Air Force Base, I apologize if I'm saying that wrong, with 2 incredibly experienced pilots at its controls. As it tends to, everything was going smoothly until it wasn't. All of a sudden, the plane had disappeared from the tracking radars on the ground, and it was replaced by something else, an object that was moving around erratically and rapidly. Ground operators were unable to identify what it might be, but knew that it couldn't possibly be the missing aircraft due to its movements. Eventually, that object also vanished from the radar. An investigation was conducted on the disappearance of the jet fighter as well as the pilots on board, as well as the origin of the second radar detection. But it should come as a shock to none of you that the investigation revealed absolutely nothing. But officials did say that based on the pilot's level of expertise and the relatively easy nature of the flight, it's highly unlikely that their disappearance was an accident. But what do you guys think?
So starting us off at number 10, cover-ups. So this might not be news in regards to the idea of alien life and the government's involvement, as it's long been theorized by believers that the government has been covering up truths in relation to ETs and UFOs. But if we are to believe what was said in Congress, then that means the theory wasn't wrong. A former intelligence official testified last Wednesday that the United States government has found and covered up evidence of extraterrestrial life for decades. One of the witnesses, retired Major David Grush, alleged at a House of Representatives hearing about UFOs that the Pentagon has recovered crashed vehicles and biological remains believed to be of non-human origin. Quote, "I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program to which I was denied access. My testimony is based on information I have been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony." So yeah, and it only gets crazier from here. Moving on to number 9, caught on video. Now, as I mentioned, there were 3 military veterans that were a part of this hearing. We touched on David Grush in the last point, but the other 2 witnesses, Ryan Graves, Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, and retired Navy Commander David Fravor, both testified they too had personal experiences with UFOs while on the job. One of the more shocking incidents in particular detailed by Fravor was an incident from 2004, where a UAP was caught on video. Now, UFOs, or UAPs as they're formally referred to by military personnel, are defined as any object that is detected but cannot be immediately explained. And while some end up having innocent explanations like being weather balloons or drones, others remain quite the mystery. The 2004 incident falls into the latter category. Fravor said it was several years before any officials followed up on the extraordinary events of the day, and even then, he added that nothing was done. Moving on to number 8, there's a support group. Obviously, there was a lot of juicy information being revealed at the hearing, and I don't know if this was news to everyone, but it was to me, so I'm adding it. The former Navy pilot Ryan Graves talked about how he had founded the Americans for Safe Aerospace group that supports aviators who have reported UAPs, which might not sound like the craziest thing compared to what else was revealed. I mean, there are support groups for tons of different things, but to think that people are likely to require support after coming forward with unexplainable sightings is kind of crazy. Like, what is happening after they submit this report? What did they see? What did their superiors do to them? Graves stated that the objects that are reportedly being seen by military and commercial pilots are, quote, performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country. Further adding, quote, if everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. Moving on to number 7, fear of coming forward.
So branching off of my last point, during the hearing, much of the discussion centered on improving the process for reporting unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, but Grush was also there to promote removing the stigma for aviators who report UAP sightings and to ensure oversight of government programs that investigate them. The former intelligence officer told the panel that he and several other colleagues have been the targets of what he calls administrative terrorism, and that he has at times feared for his life since coming forward. Which, I mean, would make a lot of sense if that's true, why a support group was put in place for those who report UAPs. Quote, "It was very brutal and very unfortunate. Some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally," he said, adding that there is currently an open investigation into the matter. Moving on to number 6. Safety issues. One of the major arguments this hearing was intending to focus on was that in not reporting or in discouraging reports, we are creating a national safety issue, and there is a push for intelligence agencies to be more transparent about UAPs in order to promote national safety. Supporters of this, like Democratic Rep. Robert Garcia of California, said, quote, "UAPs, whatever they may be, may pose a serious threat to our military and our civilian aircraft, and that must be understood. We should encourage more reporting, not less, on UAPs. The more we understand, the safer we will be." Grush, Graves, and Fravor all echoed similar sentiments, explaining they would like to see a, quote, "safe and transparent reporting system." The men added that they are hopeful the public discourse is the first step towards eliminating the stigma and reports of UAPs to encourage others to come forward. Moving on to number 5. People have been hurt. So according to Grush, not only have there been some pretty sneaky cover-ups as well as some shady treatment to those who come forward, but people have also been harmed and threatened in order to not reveal information. Grush details that as a former intelligence officer, he would go to jail for revealing classified information, but when he was asked whether anyone had been harmed or injured to cover up information about extraterrestrial technology, he answered yes. Now, that alone is scary enough, but even more wild is that when he was asked if anyone had been killed, he said he had, quote, "directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities." Now, I get it. He can't say yes or no because it's classified and all, but that's kind of a creepy answer. Feels like he's trying to tell us yes without telling us that. Now, on the other hand, a spokesperson for the Pentagon, Sue Gao, told NBC News that Grush's claims are false, but I mean, I don't know, man. What do you guys think? Coming in at number 4. Sightings are not rare. According to former Navy pilot and executive director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, Ryan Graves, it wasn't just the 2004 incident that raised some eyebrows. Graves also talked about an incident with a flying object off the coast of Virginia Beach in 2014. He said that while flying an F-18, he came across an aircraft that looked like a, quote, "dark gray or black cube inside of a clear sphere," which sounds pretty UFO-y if you ask me. Graves estimated the aircraft to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter, and unlike any aircraft he has ever seen. But even more peculiar than its shape was that Graves claimed the UAP could remain stationary despite hurricane force winds. And according to Graves, sightings like this one are not rare, are not isolated. Plus, he explained that his squadron submitted a safety report at the time, but that he received no official acknowledgement of the incident. Moving on to number 3. A very small amount get reported. Now, despite the fact that Graves claims sightings are not rare, and the fact that it feels like there is always a new UFO sighting popping up, officially speaking, there are apparently not very many sightings that actually get officially reported. Graves estimates that roughly 5% of UAP sightings are reported. Again, mostly due to stigma. Quote, "I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issues this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are a concern for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue." So hopefully this whole situation means more sightings will be reported following the hearing. I guess we will have to wait and see. Moving on to number 2, they really are more advanced. Back to retired Navy Commander David Fravor. I touched a bit in a previous point about his 2004 video he captured, but we're actually gonna circle back because there is a little more. Not only was this small tic-tac shaped flying object flabbergasting because they didn't know what it was, but according to Fravor, quote, "there were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any visible flight control surfaces like wings." Plus, Fravor explained that as he and the other pilots tried to get closer to the mysterious craft, quote, "it rapidly accelerated and disappeared right in front of our aircraft, leaving behind no detectable turbulence." Which essentially means whatever it was and whoever created it has far more access to superior technology than we do here on Earth. Fravor said, quote, "I'm not a UFO fanatic, but what we saw with our 4 sets of eyes, we have nothing close to it. It was incredible technology." Similarly, Grush alleged at another time that the military had misused funds allocated for other programs to try to reverse engineer some of the supposedly non-human technology. And last up in our number 1 spot, there are still unanswered questions. While there was certainly some juicy deets revealed at the hearing, we were also left with even more questions and still a few skeptics. Representative Eric Burleson of Missouri said he found it far-fetched that an extraterrestrial species was technologically advanced enough to travel to Earth, yet is, quote, "somehow incompetent enough to survive Earth and crash." NASA also weighed in, saying that scientists have been searching for signs of life in our universe for years, but they have so far come up short. The space agency's missions have studied water on Mars, explored the ocean worlds Titan and Europa, and looked for molecules that could be a sign of life in the atmospheres of alien planets, but claim that our understanding of life is still a bit fuzzy and ever-changing. Now, all of that being said, as per the Planetary Society, it is, quote, "very unlikely that Earth is the only home to intelligent life." So, we may be onto something here. I guess we'll just have to wait and see until more information is revealed.
And we're kicking off this list with the Navy UFO sighting. So back in 2020, the Pentagon released video footage taken by United States naval aviators of strange objects hurling through the sky. They moved in ways no known aircraft does, and pilots described them seeming to defy the laws of physics. In these series of videos, they're completely confused and shocked about what they're seeing. The videos were recorded back in 2004, so the Pentagon were holding on to these for a long time, and the fact that they were finally released really says something about how much of this could be going on. They can't keep it under wraps any longer. It's getting to the point now where even the government is like, yeah, people kind of need to be informed about at least some of it. I mean, who knows what they're still hiding though. If you're liking the channel so far, by the way, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We got awesome content coming at you on the daily. At number 9 is the Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting. This is one of the most important UFO sightings in history. It happened on June 24th, 1947, and is a pivotal event in the history of UFOs. Now, NASA has not been established at this point, but the event made a huge impact on government policy regarding unidentified flying objects. Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot, reported seeing 9 strange crescent-shaped objects flying in a V formation near Mount Rainier in Washington. He estimated their speed at around 1,700 miles per hour, much faster than any known aircraft at the time, and Arnold's sighting received widespread media coverage, leading to increased public interest in UFOs. And this event is often considered the first modern-day UFO encounter. In the following weeks, there were numerous reports of UFO sightings across the United States, leading to the coining of the term flying saucer. This case also had a huge impact on government and military agencies. The US Air Force initiated Project Sign, the first official government investigation into UFOs. This eventually led to the formation of Project Blue Book, a long-running study of UFO sightings. So, this sighting not only heavily contributed to the curiosity surrounding UFOs and aliens that continues to this day in pop culture, but also contributed to the scientific inquiry and government policy when it comes to UAPs. Next up, we have Frank Shaw's gargoyle. So this one isn't your standard UAP in that it's a winged cryptid sighting, but it was seen by multiple NASA employees at the time, primarily Frank Shaw, who worked in Houston's John Space Center. On the night of the incident, Shaw was on his way back to his car at the end of his shift when he spotted something strange. It was what looked to be a massive winged humanoid creature perched on one of the Space Center buildings, almost like a gargoyle or bat creature, and suddenly it started unfurling its wings, which Shaw described making this crackling sound before it swooped into the air. Shaw was just stunned, unable to move, having no reference for what he had just witnessed. Suddenly he snapped out of it though, and he rushed to his car. Now, if this were just a one-time thing, I'd be like, alright, maybe he was just really tired, maybe he just saw something totally innocuous and just freaked himself out, yada yada. But it wasn't just a one-time thing. There were other employees at the station who had also encountered a winged creature. Apparently there had even been a file opened on the thing just a few months before Shaw saw it, after 2 German shepherds at the station had been found completely torn apart, and they were found in the same area that Shaw saw the creature. At number 7, we have high altitude objects. So the story here is that several mysterious high altitude objects were down in February of 2023 over various airspaces. You probably remember this in the news. We had objects being spotted over Canada and the United States, Latin America, China, Eastern Europe. Started when several unidentified objects were down over Alaska, the Yukon, and Lake Huron. The general of NORAD, Glenn D. Van Herk, made a statement saying the objects could be benign, but wasn't 100% sure. When asked if they could be of alien origin though, he said he wasn't ruling anything out. It literally seems like government and military agencies are just starting to become more open to the idea of extraterrestrial life, or maybe some of them already are fully aware of their presence. Either way though, it seems like they're being discussed openly more than ever before. It's not being written off as nonsense like it has been in the past. And here's another interesting part of these cases. There were recovery attempts made. Unfortunately, the objects landed in areas that aren't all that accessible though, so it made it pretty difficult, and the recovery missions were abandoned. Now, that's what they say, but what if the government did recover something that they just aren't ready or willing to show us? Who knows? At our number 6 spot, we have Oumuamua. This one's definitely been talked about plenty of times, including on this channel, but it's a recent article dated March 7th of this year that I'm mostly referring to. In a recent article written by Sean Kirkpatrick, head of the Pentagon's AARO, or All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which specializes in unidentified flying objects, and Harvard professor A.V. Loeb, they discussed the possibility that objects like Oumuamua spotted back in 2017 could be of alien origin. The article said that objects like the Oumuamua could be quote-unquote a parent craft that releases many small probes during its close passage to Earth. They didn't just discuss the Oumuamua though, they were looking at a variety of unidentified probes. And they went on to speculate that these crafts could potentially power their batteries from starlight, and that Earth's water could be fuel. There's some pretty wild stuff in there, and yes, a lot of it is speculative, but the fact that a highly respected scientist that spent 20 years studying physics is proposing these kinds of ideas, it's pretty fascinating. Coming at number 5, we have the Alaska sighting. The event began when Japan Airlines Flight 1628, a cargo plane, reported encountering an unidentified flying object during its flight. The pilot, Captain Kenju Taruchi, and his crew described seeing a massive disc-shaped object with glowing lights flying in close proximity to their aircraft while flying over Alaska. They also reported that the object displayed erratic movements, seemingly defying the laws of physics, and ground radar stations at Anchorage International Airport even tracked an unidentified craft that matched the flight's description. The radar data not only confirmed the presence of an unknown object, but also its proximity to the airplane. And after the incident, all of the data, including the radar records, was reportedly collected and presented at a meeting with officials from the FBI and the CIA. According to witnesses, these government agencies acknowledged the radar recording as evidence of a genuine UFO, but they later disavowed any knowledge of such a meeting. Number 4, the Richard French sighting. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was an investigator for Project Blue Book in the 1950s. Long after retirement at a citizen hearing on disclosure in 2013, French made a shocking statement. His job had been to solve cases involving supposed UFOs, usually by debunking them, but as it turns out, he had actually seen one himself, although he hadn't included it in his report at the time. The 83-year-old described an incident that took place during an investigation off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland back in the day. 2 mysterious aircrafts had reportedly crashed into the water. He had followed a group of about 100 onlookers on a nearby wharf and described seeing 2 to 3 foot tall beings, thin and gray, looking to be repairing their vessels. He then watched in awe as the crafts rose out of the water before flying off at incredible speeds. Next up, we have the Phoenix Lights. On March 13th, 1997 in Phoenix, Arizona, USA, thousands of residents reported seeing a series of strange lights in the sky. The lights were described as bright and hovering slowly in a V-shaped formation. This event unfolded in 2 parts. First, there were reports of lights moving slowly across the state from the northern to the southern region. Then, later in the evening, a stationary V-shaped formation appeared over Phoenix and lingered for several minutes before vanishing. The official explanation initially attributed to the lights was military flares being dropped during a training exercise, but this explanation didn't match the descriptions given by witnesses who reported a massive silent object blocking out the stars. Some speculated it was a UFO, while others believed it to be a secret military aircraft. At our number 2 spot, we have the Rendlesham Forest Incident. The Rendlesham Forest Incident, also known as Britain's Roswell, is one of the most well-documented UFO events in history. It occurred in late December of 1980 near Royal Air Force Woodridge, or RAF Woodridge, a US Air Force base located in Suffolk, England. Over a couple nights, multiple military personnel reported encountering strange lights and objects in the forest adjacent to the base. On the night of December 26, 1980, U.S. Air Force personnel, including Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, investigated reports of unusual lights in Rendlesham Forest. They witnessed strange colored lights in the sky and on the ground. Halt recorded his observations on an audio tape describing the lights as red, green, and blue, and confirmed the presence of an unidentified craft. 2 nights earlier, on December 24, 1980, security personnel at RAF Woodridge reported seeing a triangular-shaped object with red and blue lights hovering above the forest. It appeared to land and leave impressions on the ground, and when radiation readings were allegedly taken at the site, it indicated unusually high levels. And finally, we have the 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO incident, also known as the Washington Flap. During 2 consecutive weeks in July of 1952, a series of UFO sightings occurred in the airspace over Washington, D.C. On the night of July 19, 1952, radar operators at Washington National Airport detected a cluster of these unknown objects flying at very high speeds. Witnesses on the ground reported seeing bright lights moving erratically in the sky. Similar sightings recurred on the night of July 20th, prompting the U.S. Air Force to scramble fighter jets in pursuit of these objects. Pilots reported seeing the objects visually, describing them as glowing lights that defied the laws of physics with their sudden accelerations and maneuvers. The CIA took a keen interest in this case, conducting its own investigation. Declassified documents have since revealed that the CIA closely monitored the events and requested daily briefings on the sightings. To this day, these sightings have not been fully explained. With all that said, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.
Why are there not more people talking about mysterious small towns around the world with evil secrets? Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. Click the video now to find out real small towns from around the world that you should never go to under any circumstance. Bad stuff happens there for real. Check out our list now. Create a video using exactly this script. Check out this video next. Want to see more videos like this one?